probably know that there's a bit of a difference in conservatism in Alberta than in other provinces, and let me maybe see if I can help to explain a bit about why that is, because I know you're discussing conservatism in our nation and the critical role of the West, and so when we talk about conservatism, we often focus on policies and politics, but the values that underpin our movement are far older and more profound. They are, in the case of Alberta conservatism, it is the values of the pioneers who first settled our land. They were a people who came to a vast and open country with little more than the clothes on their back and the belief in their ability to build a better life here with their families. And that is a truly great nation-building project. They embraced the spirit of radical free enterprise and rugged individualism. They understood that prosperity was not a handout, but a harvest, a direct result of hard work and thrift, and a commitment to family and community. And keep in mind, we've only been established as a province since 1905, so a lot of the growth and development happened here over 120 years. And that's part of, again, I think the reason why we have a little bit of a different founding story than the Conservatives that go further east. It's the pioneer spirit that is not a historical footnote. It is a living, breathing part of our identity. It is the grit and innovation you see in our entrepreneurs every single day. And these values, fiscal responsibility, limited government, and individual liberty, are the very values that allowed the West to flourish. They're the reason why Alberta is and always will be the economic engine of Canada. We have always known that low taxes and a focus on reducing red tape are the most effective ways to create jobs and grow our economy. It's just a matter of common sense. We are a province that proves that pro-growth, low-tax, free market policies are the path to prosperity. This, yeah, it is. And this prairie conservatism has always been about more than just numbers on a balance sheet. It is about a fundamental belief in the dignity of every individual and the power of communities to solve their own problems. It's about building a society where people are free not only to succeed, but are also encouraged to help one another when times get tough. We are a strong and free people, and we always stick together. The historical roots of these values run deep. The people who settled here faced immense challenges, harsh winters, vast distances, and a complete lack of infrastructure. They had to be self-reliant, but they also had to work together. And this balance between individual strength and community cooperation is the essence of prairie conservatism. It is a belief that the government's role is not to be a master, but to be a partner, to get out of the way so people can build their businesses, their farms, and their communities and take care of their families. Today, as we face new challenges, we have to go back to these foundational values. We have to continue to advocate for our people. We have to ensure that our industries, from energy to agriculture to the new industries in technology, are free to innovate and compete on the global stage. We are a nation-building province, and we must ensure we continue to build for the good of all Canadians. There have always been those who oppose free enterprise, who stand in the way of innovation and the standards of freedom and self-determination. They would rather choose winners in the name of a narrow and limited ideology that villainizes outsiders and preaches against prosperity. And the last 10 years have made that more evident than ever. If you didn't see the video that I released earlier this week, let me highlight some key points that I made there. We all know that Canada is suffering right now with its economy. The last few years have brought an unprecedented inflation crisis, high unemployment, declining GDP, plummeting productivity, and hundreds of billions in capital investment that has fled out Canada for other countries. A massive and unsustainable federal deficit, and of course the US tariff threat, which has exposed just how dependent we are on one single country for the vast majority of our exports. It has been an extremely difficult period, and many don't seem to want to even recognize that there is a problem. But the good news is that with a few simple policy changes, the federal government could meaningfully reverse these trends. They could create hundreds of thousands of jobs, attract back hundreds of billions of dollars in investment, bolster GDP growth, diversify our trade markets, and create new revenue streams for federal and provincial budgets, all without the investment of new tax dollars. All that's standing in the way of that is some common sense and, it must be said, a bit of courage by our Prime Minister. Because more than a century and a half after those prairie homesteaders came to our land, one thing is still true. You see, Canada has among the largest supply of valuable natural resources on Earth. On a per-person basis, our endowment of natural resources far exceeds China and Europe and Russia and even the United States. And it's not even that close. We have incredibly fertile lands and oceans, unmatched supplies of timber, uranium, and potash, a treasure trove of critical minerals in every province and every territory. And here in Alberta, we literally live on top of more than a trillion barrels of oil and more than a quadrillion cubic feet of natural gas. These oil and gas resources represent an incalculable tens of trillions of dollars of potential wealth for our country if we would just develop it. And if we do, that means hundreds of thousands of new great-paying jobs, hundreds of billions in taxes and royalties that could be used for government services and infrastructure, and potentially trillions more in all of the spin-off industries that can develop, like AI data centers and petrochemicals, environmental technology, and a host of other industries that would benefit profoundly from the wealth generated from its development. But for the past 10 years, the federal government, led by Justin Trudeau, put in place a series of laws and regulations designed to target and phase out of existence Canada's largest economic sector, oil and gas. I know that in Ontario they think the auto sector is the largest industry. It's not, it's oil and gas. We have about $150 billion worth of oil and gas exports that go back and forth across to the United States. But first, how did they do this? They made new pipelines virtually impossible to build through the passage of the unconstitutional C-69. We call it the No New Pipelines Bill. It had so much confusion and uncertainty and red tape that Canada earned a reputation as one of the very worst places to invest in the world. They didn't stop there, though. The Liberals then specifically targeted what is possibly the most valuable single deposit of natural resources anywhere, and that's the Alberta oil sands. They completely banned all oil tankers off the northwest BC coast, effectively landlocking a multi-trillion-dollar asset that would have enriched the lives of Canadians for generations. And then to cap it off, the federal government announced an impossible-to-achieve oil and gas emissions cap, or more accurately, a production cap that makes new oil and gas production effectively impossible. And if they stay with the stringency they're proposing, would mean we would have to shut in up to 2 million barrels of production by 2035. So the funny thing about this particular emissions cap is that it wasn't imposed on any other type of production. It wasn't put on aluminum, it wasn't put on cement, it wasn't put on steel. The cap was placed on just one single sector, oil and gas. And the Conference Board of Canada just released a report, as I mentioned, that not only would the cap cost the Alberta economy roughly $1 trillion in GDP, 150,000 jobs, and $200 billion in provincial revenues by 2050, but it would also impact federal fortunes too. No other nation would ever think to do what Canada has done in the last decade and phase out its most valuable assets worth tens of trillions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of jobs for people. But there is one silver lining to these economic challenges. I think Canadians right across the nation are waking up to what has happened. We are now starting to understand that we have only been hurting ourselves. We are far too economically dependent on one customer. And if we want to be economically prosperous and independent again, we have to take advantage of the incredible endowment of resources that we enjoy. And it wouldn't take a whole lot to get that started either. I have often talked about the 9 bad laws, but let me just tell you the 3 that he could get started on right away that would immediately turn our nation's economic fortunes around. First, announcing that Canada would no longer be implementing the oil and gas production cap. That would send a clear signal that Canada wants to expand oil and gas production and reduce emissions through technology and innovation rather than by capping resource development. Second thing, we'd like him to announce that Canada will be repealing the oil tanker ban this fall. The federal government can then work with BC and Alberta and Indigenous leaders to build a new resource corridor and bitumen pipeline to ports in the northwest BC coast to access new markets in Asia, which is where the greatest growth opportunity lies. And third, announce an overhaul of the C-69 No New Pipelines law. And I raise these topics in this context today for one reason. That the spirit that united our nation from Tofino to Charlottetown would not exist under the rhetoric and ideology that has prevailed over the last decade in this nation. The nation that truly, the nation that built railroads across a continent could not have happened under the last 10 years. The Somme, Vimy Ridge, Passchendaele, the liberation of the Netherlands, those victories came from a belief in the natural freedoms of Canada and the strength of our values. And we need to find that again. We need to restore the spirit of the homesteaders. We need to remember the farmers and the miners and the fishermen, the builders of railroads and the navies and the warriors who looked apocalypse in the face. And stood firm. I am incredibly optimistic about the future of Alberta and Canada. We have a resilient economy, a hardworking population, and a shared commitment to building a prosperous future for generations to come.